Let me pull up the document here. Are we ready to start? We have a quorum, right? Okay. So call to order pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023 as amended on March 28, 2025. This meeting will be conducted via remote means in accordance with applicable law. This meeting being recorded and may be viewed at another time by visiting https // THELOCALSEEN, the local scene, dot media /Duxbury for information about Duxbury programming and watching replays on Duxbury YouTube. So with that preamble, we'll call the meeting to order. First item is 94 Buckboard Road for a variance. I think Shane is presenting on that one, I believe.
Hey, Doc. How are you? Hi. Hello, everyone. So, Shane McClone here. I hope you can hear me. We're over at 94 Buckboard Road, and as you can see on the screen, there's a substantial amount of wetland in the middle of the property that is going to sort of drive the train in terms of where the new septic system gets situated. So we are proposing to put in a septic tank and a leaching field right in the front and get essentially as far away from the wetlands as we can, which in this case is 54 feet for the leaching field. Luckily, we conform to Title V completely, but we need variances from the Duxbury regulations regarding the setback to the wetlands from 150 feet to 54, and water table separation from 6 feet to 5 feet would enable it to maintain the gravity-fed leaching field. And that's pretty much it.
Ian, can you talk a little bit about how you selected the location there in terms of, what's going on to the south of the property, well, the southeast corner versus what you decided on?
I hope you can see that there's a dashed line that where it says Buckboard Road at the bottom of the lot. Underneath
Yes.
the bottom of that, there's a dashed line that kind of hooks around, and it goes over the right property line, hooks back through the house, and then goes up. That's the 100-foot setback. So essentially, the furthest spot away from the wetlands would be behind the house where there's no room at all. The second furthest spot away would be where it is, and luckily that's where the existing septic is now as well. So that was essentially how they got it to fit there in the first place, by sticking it in that same spot.
And the existing structure is that the reason for is that a failed system?
Yes.
I'm guessing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's existing 4-bedroom house with a failed system. Exactly. And the system that we're replacing it is largely the same as the one that's there.
Is it in the same location as the one that's there?
Yes, basically it is in that very location. The tank is going to be in the same spot. It's higher. We're raising the plumbing to get 5-foot separation, but essentially the location is in the same spot, but it is higher above the water table than the current one is.
And I'm trying to see, but the distance to the water line coming into the house from the leaching field, that's over 10.
Yes, which that's essentially one of the factors that I climbed right up to that 10-foot setback. That was essentially what dictated how much room I had on that side of the layout. You know, it is in a zone 2. There is 41,000 feet of land. They have a 4-bedroom house. They'll never be able to add any bedrooms over here, you know, without, you know, treatment, even at the state level. So I think we're doing pretty good by having a 5-foot separation and getting as far away from the wetlands as we can.
And that 41,000 square feet, that's above the wetland, delineated
No,
wetland.
no, good point. Good point. You're right, Mike. Good point. I forgot we're in Duxbury. That does not count that way in Duxbury. I forgot. So even less.
I'm sorry, Mike, could you clarify? I lost the idea there.
Just the lot square footage, the minimum square feet of upland has to be 40,000 square feet. So I guess when this lot was originally created,
It was just square footage, right? Exactly. And it didn't have upland, wasn't part of the calculation.
Oh, that's interesting.
But when it comes to zone 2 restrictions, and we're allowed to have 1 bedroom per 10,000 square feet of upland. So in this case, there's a big chunk of wetland right in the middle of it. So this property is not going to be able to add any bedrooms at any point, really. Honestly, I was just happy to see that it was on the property. At one point, I didn't know if it was the house, that is.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. If not, then I'll make a motion to grant a variance to Duxbury supplementary rules and regulations 1.10(1)(a), allowing the proposed soil absorption system to be located at 54 feet from a wetland versus the required 150.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye and raise your hand as well.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Next, I'd like to make a motion to grant a variance to Duxbury supplementary rules and regulations 1.10(1)(b), allowing the proposed soil absorption system to be constructed 5 feet to the water table versus 6 feet.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. All in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Comments and findings. 1, this is an existing 4-bedroom dwelling with no proposed increase in flow. 2, this property is located in a zone 2 wellhead protection area with no proposed increase in flow. 3, this is the best location for the system that maximizes distance to the wetlands. And 4, this system is not designed for a garbage grinder. Those all acceptable?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. I think we're all set then. Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Good evening.
Thank you.
See. Oops, sorry. I have to navigate through the Dropbox here and just get back to the agenda. Sorry. Okay. Next item looks like continued discussion with the Safe Water Committee. Do we have
So we
anyone?
don't have Becky Chin with us this evening. Probably holiday stuff, and she wasn't able to make it, I guess. So
Okay.
I just always keep it on the agenda and let her know in case she has updates. So
Okay. Okay, thank you. Next item is the Duxbury Bay Management Commission State of the Bay Report 2025. I think we have Mr. Peter Quigley here to walk us through that.
Perfect. Good evening, everyone. My name is Peter Quigley. I'm a member of the Bay Management Commission. And just by way of background, in 2009, the Bay Management commissioned a State of the Bay report. It hadn't been updated in nearly 15 years. So we set out about 18 months ago to do a very comprehensive update on the state of the Bay. If you're interested, the report can be found on the Conservation Commission website. There's a 2-page key findings, 5-page executive summary, and then there is something approaching 125-page report that covers all kinds of different aspects of things that are affecting Duxbury Bay. So, Lauren, I don't know, did you want to screen share or do you want me to go ahead and screen share? I have a presentation that I pulled together for our discussion. Oh, perfect. Okay, excellent. So why don't you skip down to the first page, and I'm going to go through these first 2 pages quite quickly, and I really want to devote more time to discuss water quality issues that have an overlap with the Board of Health. I think it goes without saying how vital, to our culture, our community, and our economy and ecology is Duxbury Bay. A lot of changes in the past 15 years when this report was last updated. An enormous increase in the participants in DBMS, which is wonderful to get people connected to Duxbury Bay, but there's been a 40% increase and on the order of 25 individual participants taking one or more programs at DBMS. Deepwater moorings have been a wait list forever, but the remarkable thing is really since the pandemic, there never was a flats mooring list. And today there are 350 people waiting to be able to put a mooring on the flats in Duxbury. In terms of oysters, 3x increase over 2009, 12 million oysters were harvested in Duxbury Bay in 2024. And Duxbury Beach is under increasing stress, trying to balance their mission of recreation, conservation, and preservation, and also protecting Duxbury as a community from otherwise open water to our northeast. That next page, Lauren. Um, some things about in this report. I think there are 11 different sections. I just touched on a couple here. The oyster industry is having an enormous economic impact. It's a year-round activity, which didn't used to be the case in Duxbury Bay. But as it also relates to water quality, sort of the growing of oysters and shellfish actually has a water quality benefit in terms of removing nutrients from the water, so long as those shellfish are removed and consumed by people. So there's a lot, 12 million oysters actually has the effect based on a NOAA calculator of something like offsetting the contributions of nutrients from about 750 resident septic system contributions. So it's a fairly significant offset to the contribution of nutrients to the bay from septic systems. Um, Pathogens, there's a lot of testing. In fact, the amount of testing's increased with the oyster fishery. The state does testing in the oyster fishery at various times, various places, and every bathing beach is tested. I think, is that, Lauren, your responsibility, Board of Health, that does the bathing beach testing?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so tons of data there. Biggest concern is after an extended dry period, when we have a lot of rain, oftentimes the water quality is impacted for a short period of time due to a lot of the accumulation of stuff on land that runs into the water when there's a lot of rain. Okay, I'll go to the next piece because this is where I really want to devote a little bit more attention. We're seeing some adverse changes in the environment in Duxbury Bay. One of the most profound is the die-off of eelgrass. This is something the Mass DEP has been very focused on over the course of the last 15 or so years. They've done aerial surveys, and a number of different organizations have done studies, and also there was a remediation effort about 5 years ago that was unsuccessful, led by Mass Bays and the North South River watershed. But depending on who you ask, the loss of eelgrass in Duxbury Bay is significantly greater than the majority of where it was 20 or more years ago. So that's a really worrying sign. There's some opportunity to do remediation. I think there have been new techniques developed, especially in the Chesapeake Bay. But when you see that image on the left, that's becoming rarer and rarer to see in Duxbury Bay, where this used to be a very common, how the bottom looked over large areas of Duxbury Bay. Okay, next slide.
Peter,
Yeah.
so you mentioned some new methods. Can you give a couple of examples of that?
Sure. I think in the past, the method that was tried was the seeds were harvested and basically respread at a later time in the year, and the seeds didn't take. And that's my very layperson's understanding. The technique that they developed at the Chesapeake is actually harvesting the seeds in May, June timeframe, and then germinating the seeds on land in tanks. And actually, Island Creek has done some experiments, as well as the North South River watershed, where they actually sprouted the seeds and then reintroduced the seeds that have already started to develop roots later in the season, more like in the August, September timeframe. And they've restored thousands of acres now in the Chesapeake. And of course, what you're using is using local stock, which has survived. So it has the best genetics in terms of being able to survive in the current conditions. So a grant was awarded. A lot of organizations in town are helping: the Maritime School, Island Creek, the Bay Management Commission. The lead is the Mass Bays and the North South River watershed. And that activity is going to be occurring in Duxbury Bay this summer and next summer. So people are optimistic there's going to be some opportunity to remediate some of the eelgrass loss.
Thank you.
Any other questions, or I'll dig in on the water quality here. This was a little bit of a Easter egg hunt because there wasn't a lot of institutional knowledge about who was doing what and when were they doing it and where were they testing from. And the issue of nutrients impacting coastal, marine water quality has been worked on for over 35 years in Buzzards Bay. And the Buzzards Bay Coalition is one of the leading organizations that's put together an enormous citizen science program. And I started there and I said, what do you do? How have you done it? What are the things you look for? And they sort of casually said, well, if you talk to the people at the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension, because they've been doing water quality testing and they have a permanent real-time measurement buoy at one of our oyster farmers' leases, which is shown on this map, CCCE Sond. They've been taking continuous water quality measurements since 2013. And then I met with them and they came to Duxbury and they said, "Oh, have you talked to the people from the Center of Coastal Studies in Provincetown? They've been doing water quality testing since 2006 or 2015. And it turns out they've been taking laboratory samples every 2 weeks from May through October at the Powder Point Bridge, the Bluefish River Bridge, Harbor Master Dock, as well as other locations in Kingston and Plymouth for nearly 20 years. Very high quality, high integrity data. Um, Honestly, it was just luck that the data was there because we had the ability to go back. Measuring the data in itself is a challenge. It's actually a whole different challenge to go back and look at the data and try and analyze it, make sure it's statistically sound, and draw some conclusions. So that's what the Bay Management Commission undertook. Was we contracted a third-party expert to do what turned out to be about 125 hours of analysis on the existing data to be able to draw some conclusions about what's happening in terms of water quality. Because we were really focused, we were not focused on pollutants in the traditional sense, like industrial pollutants. We were really focused on the effects of excess nutrients in the water. So the parameters that you're interested in measuring are total dissolved nitrogen, so nitrates and nitrites, temperature, dissolved oxygen, chlorophyll, which is an indication of, we call it microscopic plant growth, this total dissolved nitrogen and turbidity. So all of these organizations have been testing for all those parameters. And a couple of the conclusions are here. And some of these we can't do anything about. We can't control temperature, and there is a significant warming that's occurring in Cape Cod Bay. We didn't see in 20 years of data statistical evidence of warming in Duxbury Bay, but what was apparent, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, was an increasing of what we call high heat stress events, where for at least an hour during a day, there were temperatures measured above 25 degrees C in locations in Duxbury Bay, and that's 77 degrees. So if you think about that, it's like tropical water in Duxbury Bay. There's an increasing number of days where that is occurring, and 25 degrees is considered a threshold for a stressor for the environment that we live in. So that's obviously not a good thing. It's not necessarily something we can do anything about. But what we'll talk about as it relates to nutrients, I believe there is something we can do about. So I'm going to move on to the next section. Any questions on this piece? And there we built a website that's accessible on the Conservation Commission, or if you just remembered duxburywaterquality.org, you can go to a map of all this water quality measurement data with links to the data and also the organizations that have been doing the testing. This is where I think the Board of Health needs to be really aware of this, because there is going to be potentially regulatory considerations down the road. And the Mass Estuaries, which was a division of the US EPA, has undertaken studies of all the coastal estuaries in Massachusetts and tried to make an assessment using some measurement, but also quite extensive modeling. They have a draft threshold for Duxbury Bay, which has not yet been endorsed by the EPA. But the indication that I wanted to share with you is green is exceeding the draft state threshold for a healthy marine environment. And quite interesting, except for the very upper reaches of the Jones River, both Kingston and Plymouth actually are not suffering in the way that Duxbury is because of how much tidal exchange they get from Cape Cod Bay. But if you took that line, it's more or less a straight line across from the Harbor Master to High Pines. All of the upper reaches, what we would all really refer to as Duxbury Bay, is at or above the threshold where the state will consider the water quality to be impaired. And I'll talk about what that means from a Board of Health and a regulatory standpoint. But that's not good, right? So I wanted to say our measurement data bore this out. And I think I have a slide on the next page that shows. So anyhow, just in terms of sources, because this is really why I think having your engagement is so important. It's most likely that 70% of the sources are septic systems. Fertilizer is the other primary source. We don't have a lot of agriculture in Duxbury. We have 160 acres of cranberry in total. They're very heavily regulated with fertilizer application and pesticides. Unlikely that the agriculture sector in Duxbury is a significant contributor. But golf courses, large playing fields, homeowners that are applying fertilizer that runs off very quickly into the groundwater or into the bay, along with septic systems, are the primary sources of excess nitrogen loading into these environments. Next page. So this is from West Falmouth Harbor, and interestingly, I just came from a coastal zone management meeting where they have a study focusing on the upstream of the Bluefish, south of the Harrison Street Bridge, going across the. This is West Falmouth Harbor. Actually, some of the ponds that are behind Washington Street are starting to look like this. There's algae growth all the way up the watershed to the Bluefish that is much more pronounced than the people that have lived in that area have said was the case in the past. This is not what's happening in Duxbury Bay, but I don't know if any of you noticed, the flats have much more algae growth on them than they ever have historically. And if you look at Duxbury, not so much in December, but if you look at the flats, anytime from May until November, there's a distinct green sheen in a lot of Duxbury's flats that was not present 5 years ago. The oyster people are noticing it. They're getting a lot more fouling of the gear. And it's not as obvious as this, but this is actually happening in Duxbury Bay at a much lower scale, obviously, than this, but it's also happening in the watershed of the Bluefish River. So the state calls this nitrogen pollution. And when you're talking, and you don't want to be an alarmist, people think a pollution is it's gonna like damage your health and there's like a contaminant. Of course, nitrogen is the most common element in air. It's roughly 80% of the atmosphere is made up of nitrogen, but it's also essential for photosynthesis. So plants don't grow without nitrogen. But the nitrogen compounds, unfortunately, they work great in gardens, but they also do the same thing when they're put into a marine environment. Unfortunately, they stimulate growth, which is the wrong kind of growth. And the growth can lead to these cycles of growth and decay that remove oxygen when the algae and phytoplankton are decaying. So you can get episodes where even in a marine environment, you can have very low levels of oxygen. So this is a bit exactly like what you would experience if you were a gardener and you applied fertilizer. If you put fertilizer in Duxbury Bay, you're going to stimulate plant growth as well, and it's not what we want. It makes sense. I'll pause here before I talk about, I think, what we can do about it and what the recommended next steps are. Any questions? Okay, so Lauren, maybe the next slide. So this is where this is not just about like do the right thing. There's actually a regulatory train on the tracks, and the train's headed our way. And I can't predict when it's going to arrive. But these are the data. Bluefish, they started in 2015, but they go all the way back to 2006 at the harbor master and the Powder Point Bridge. And you can see, obviously, the levels at the Bluefish are, super high. And it's interesting. I've kind of gained some insight into why that might be the case. But you can also see the lower level is the harbor master, and the middle red lines are taken from the Powder Point Bridge right in the channel. All these measurements were taken sort of in the same time from a tide perspective, so that they would try and be, comparable. Trends are bad, right? The trends are increasing at the Powder Point Bridge and also at the Harbor Master. And unfortunately, even at the Harbor Master, where we have the most water exchange, we're at this threshold that the draft Mass DEP report establishes as the upper limit for total nitrogen in Duxbury Bay. So that's just worth pausing and just taking that in, because where it becomes able to be enforceable, meaning the Mass DEP can require a town to take actions, is when the draft recommendation is accepted by the EPA. It's hard to tell the timetable. It seems like the EPA is currently closed, right? It's not really open for business. But this report was established in 2017 that sets that threshold. It's likely at some point in the next 5 years or so, the EPA will accept that recommendation. And when that happens, if you go to the next slide, we can talk about what the regulatory action is. I'm going to skip this slide and come back to it. This in July of 2023, so this was just 2 years ago, the state designated for the first time nitrogen sensitive areas. Every town on the Cape is affected. It's not all of the towns, but if you look at the green or the light blue areas, those are areas that the town has designated are exceeding the thresholds, and they implement new regulations for septic systems. And just to bear that in mind, no septic system could be installed without nitrogen removal within some designation of the watershed. 500 feet is most likely the designation. I'm not sure exactly how that is implemented. There's going to be no grandfathering. So in Title V, some homes have not actually turned over since 1995 or 6, whenever Title V came into effect. And you also had just the scenario which just occurred, a failed septic system being replaced. That will not be permissible if Duxbury is designated as a nitrogen sensitive area. All new construction will require nitrogen reducing technologies, and there are not going to be any grandfathering. So if you look at the pink map, we're in it, right? And what that says is areas that could potentially be designated as nitrogen sensitive areas in the future. I just wanted to go up to that slide I skipped, and I'll cover this quickly. Here are just some ideas of what some of our neighbors are doing already. Many have seasonal or full fertilizer bans. Nantucket has, got a lot of publicity, except for agriculture, 100% fertilizer ban. Almost every one of those communities on the map has seasonal fertilizer bans. Wareham, remarkably, in 2013, passed what I'm not an expert. Someone on your committee might know. I think this must have been the most stringent septic system regulations in the state at the time. No septic system can be built within 150 feet of a waterway. And all septic systems within 500 feet have to have nitrogen removal. Think about that. We have a lot of properties that were within 150 feet of waterways in Duxbury, and voluntarily Wareham did this over 10 years ago. I have a call into the Wareham health agent, Lauren. I don't know if you've met him before. Um,
Yeah, Patrick McDonald. I know him very
yeah,
well.
great. I put a call into him just saying, how's it going? Like, what's been the experience? So you might ask him when you next have a chance to speak with him, how has that gone in Wareham? How has it worked? Has it been a disaster? How have the residents accepted it? Um, that's was very interesting. But then the other thing is all these towns are now in the process. I think if you Googled this subject, I think Falmouth just end of last month or early this month passed similar regulations to comply with these new state regs. So it's all happening just south of us on towns that are bordering Buzzards Bay or Vineyard Sound. And then I'll go down because this was a bit of a downer, but what I wanted to say is here is what we want to do about it. And I want to share with you some things that I've learned just in the last couple of weeks that I think are very exciting. I think what we need to do is we need to really understand what are the sources of the nutrient runoff, focusing on the Bluefish River watershed and the Back River watersheds. Um, we're figuring out how to do that, and I want to really engage the Board of Health to collaborate on this. I think because the primary source is going to be septic system, I think we need to make sure the Board of Health is engaged with this. If that in fact becomes a significant issue that we can identify. There are on the Bluefish especially, we have 2 golf courses, we have all of the high school and middle school playing fields. There's probably very significant fertilizer use on those properties. So there's a potential that fertilizer could have an outsized impact on the Bluefish watershed. But for sure, septic systems, and I'll share a little bit more information why I think even more so, are likely to be a significant contributor to the nitrogen pollution into the Bluefish and Back Rivers. In parallel, there are remediation initiatives that can be undertaken. And as I mentioned, the eelgrass, there's a very active program with a grant with a number of organizations in town trying to support the South River watershed. Um, just released a report. It was a 2-year study of all of the South Shore marsh systems. And really, fortunately, it has a lot to do with there's really no infrastructure on the Back River. Um, and we also have a proximity to Duxbury Beach, which is very beneficial to marsh development. Duxbury's Back River Marsh seems to be, well, according to this study, for sure the best marsh on the South Shore in terms of overall health and resilience. I think the Bluefish River marsh is a much smaller marsh, not in good shape. It's extensive amounts of Phragmite, and but it probably has less of an impact in terms of water quality than the Back River. But I was really happy to learn that it appears the Back River, the marsh is in great shape. So I don't think restoration of the Back River marsh is a priority. I think the other consideration is, there are places, the town of Mashpee was maybe the first in Massachusetts to use oysters for the purpose of water quality improvement. New York has a billion oyster project to try and improve water quality in New York harbors and some of the estuaries feeding the harbor. There are examples where using in our area oysters or quahogs specifically with the purpose of water quality improvement could have a cost benefit that would be compelling. We have an infrastructure challenge because we have so little water access. So being able to expand oyster harvest or quahog harvest might have other complicating factors. But if there's a way to actually try and produce more shellfish that can be harvested, that has a very potentially important water quality benefit. Last is we have to be able to measure because you need to make sure that the action that you're taking is actually having the intended effect. DBMS has been very active in starting a kind of pilot program. They've been supporting our Cape friends who've been doing this testing. They've been taking them out on boats. They took the eelgrass trials out in October where they were seeding eelgrass. So DBMS has got tremendous infrastructure to help this. They've also acquired some measurement systems, so they're doing some pilots on water quality measurement and testing with the idea that if any of these organizations drop out, we make sure that we don't create a gap in this data because we're gonna need it for essentially forever on a go forward basis to make sure we're staying on top of water quality. I just want to do two more slides that I've added here that I didn't present to the select board, but Mike McGee, one of the select board members, said, I think this PFAS study we did is related to what you're thinking about. And sure enough, this was from June 2024. The engineering firm Weston Sampson, we're doing a PFAS water quality study, and they did some measurements. There was a lot of analytical work here to really look at groundwater flow and to really try and identify sources. And they were suspect of the landfill and the fire department. And it turns out down here there was a carpet cleaning business at one time. So they had some suspects. This chart shows the watershed of the Bluefish River. The red line is essentially the Bluefish River watershed. And if you look at 95 Fairway Lane, that's Harrison Street. But look at the extent of which all of this water is coming out at the Bluefish. And I went to this coastal zone management, and the scientist from Woods Hole Consulting Group, remarked, standing way up in the Bluefish River, north or south of Harrison Street, so up by these ponds up here, at dead low tide, so there was no water in the marsh, there's a steady flow of fresh water going into the Bluefish River, sort of confirming that all of this is going into the Bluefish. And they said, like, this wasn't the focus of our study, but if you go down 2 slides, they said we better look at septic systems because little did probably any of us know, when we pretty much wash any of our clothes, PFAS is going into our septic systems because any athletic wear, anything stain resistant, children's clothes, all that stuff has got PFAS in it. So it turns out, not like a fire station that's spreading foam with PFAS in it on the ground, which would be a concentrated source. It turns out that they were looking at, well, what's the possible contribution of PFAS from septic systems into our water wells? And the green wells are indicated here: Depot Street, Partridge, Evergreen, and I looked at this and I was like, okay, this is the nitrogen source study for septic systems, because there's very clear standards of per gallon of septic waste. So sort of when you permit a 440 gallon 4-bedroom septic system, there's well-established standards of how many kilograms of nutrients or nitrogen compounds go into the groundwater from those systems. And so we've reached out to this organization, Weston Sampson, and say, what would it take for you to use what you've already done, but look at it from a septic contribution to the nitrogen loading into the Bluefish watershed? And so I think early in the new year, we'll get a proposal. And because they've already done most of the work, I think it's not going to be a heavy lift for them to be able to provide us with at least a high level, an analytical model that says, look, how much could septic systems be contributing? And, the very interesting thing, of course, is just a layperson's perspective is, well, all these septic systems, say out on Standish Shore, are going into Kingston Bay, and probably the ones along the waterfront along Washington Street, they're going directly into the bay. Well, it turns out they might be going directly into the Bluefish River. And I'm not saying Standish Shore is, but it might be. So that it's really kind of counterintuitive. I'm not a scientist or a hydrologist, but it was pretty shocking to see how much of the area, if you will, of Duxbury, the watershed is coming out directly into the Bluefish River, and it's flowing at low tide and it's visible like freshwaters. He said there it's never dry up there at the head of the Bluefish River, even at low tide. It's just pure fresh water coming in. So, so anyhow, I think next steps is we need to get a handle on where the nutrients are coming from. As I mentioned, there's some, fertilizer sources that are going to be pretty easy to identify. We'll be able to, know how much fertilizer is being applied and what's some range of expectation of uptake versus runoff, and then compare that with the septic systems, and um, and then we'll go from there. So I think there's a happy ending because I think we can do something about it. The bad news is I think this is going to be down the Board of Health's purview. Whether it's in the future or today, this is going to be all stuff that I think we're going to need your help to really lean on in on, and help understand and help educate the community what the trade-offs are. The good news is, when nutrient removal was being talked about, it was very much an emerging technology with all the adoption and adaption of these systems from our neighbors on the Cape. There's much, much more experience, so people have an understanding. Existing systems can be retrofit. You don't need to build a whole new septic system. People know what the economics are, and they know the effectiveness. So I think this is something which is being written into regs now. It's just not been, to my knowledge, I don't know. Has anyone permitted a personal septic system that has nutrient removal in Duxbury?
Yes.
We
Yeah.
have
Right.
quite a few.
Okay, good. So, you're familiar with it more than I am, but I think our neighbors to this, to the south and east are becoming very familiar because it's becoming part of the regs.
Thank you for this presentation. This is really, really interesting to see.
Very, yeah.
Yeah, it's great analysis. It's very, very helpful to see it. It's well designed too. All the maps and graphs and charts and so forth. It's very helpful.
Well, we're fortunate that so much work has been done. And, I found is I'm a volunteer, I'm not a scientist, but what I've found is, knowing who's doing what is half of the challenge because a lot of work is being done that's not necessarily um, fully collaborative. So a lot of it is making these connections and finding out who's doing what, and then leveraging expertise. There's a lot of expertise in our community, trying to make people aware of it and make sure people are talking to each other and helping each other. But I don't know if any of you have had experience with a nutrient source studies before, but if you have, or if you know anyone who has, I think this is something, it's the logical next step for us to be able to better understand what we can do about it. Like how much of an impact could we have if we modified our fertilizer regulations in town? What about septic regulations? What could be the impact? What are the options? So I think if any of you know, or if you have any expertise, please reach out to me because we'd love to make sure we engage effectively the Board of Health because, like I say, I think the septic piece is going to be important.
May I say something? I think that Board of Health has the primary responsibility for all this. And for a number of years, we've been discussing some of the things that should be done. Um, when you mentioned the Cape, and the Cape right now is under a different set of Title V regulations than we are, and we had invited the Department of Environmental to come and talk to us about it, and also and they told us some of the things that you're saying, that sooner or later, Duxbury, as an NSA, as a nitrogen sensitive area, is going to be doing the same regulations that Title
That's right.
V has.
Yeah.
And there's some of us here on the board that have wanted us to start planning together with the selectmen and the planning board and anybody else, getting these regulations installed. What they involve is either coming up with a municipal sewage system, or refixing every septic system that's in the town with the latest technology. For instance, that approval that we did tonight,
Yep.
that would have never happened on the Cape.
That's right.
Because, well, first of all, there's a lot of towns that are doing the municipal sewage.
Yeah.
The towns that aren't are required to use the latest technology,
Yep.
and we don't have. I've been pushing for us to start getting the regulations in place, and maybe not wait for somebody else to tell us to do it, because we all know we should do it. We know that we know that the aquifer and the flow goes to where you said it goes.
Yep.
There are people here on this board that have known this for a long time. I've been here in this town for 44 years, so I know a little bit about the town. But to me, uh, every part of Duxbury, not just Powder Point and Washington
Yep.
Street, contributes to this nitrogen sensitive problem, because it goes into the aquifer,
That's
and
right.
the flow that goes into the bay.
Yep. Yep.
So we should be. We also have. We've discovered a lot of cesspools in this town. We don't know where they are.
Yep. Yep.
And a cesspool, automatically fails.
Yep. Yep.
It's automatically set as it fails. Then something else that we do here on the board is that we approve irrigation wells all the time. Now, what is a person that's putting an irrigation well going to do? He's going to put fertilizer on his. That's why he's doing it.
Yep. Yep.
So it's not just golf courses.
No, that's right. Of course.
And
No,
so,
of course.
so this board has to be a leader, I think. And the leadership comes from the chairman, and in my mind, and the selectmen. The selectmen, of course, are ultimately responsible for the Board of Health, because they appoint us.
Yes.
So there's
So
some of us here that are. I am really pleased to see the work that you guys are doing, and maybe we'll stir up a little bit on this.
well,
this NSA.
I'm a pot stirrer, Bruce. I've been here only 30 years, so I've not been as long as you, but I agree with you. I think we should be ahead of it. What my thought is, there will be some low-hanging fruit. And like I've learned a lot, and I'll give you an example. The Snug Harbor shared system, if you did a survey in town, people would think that's a sewer water treatment system. It's a glorified septic system with a leaching field on the eighth green at the Duxbury Yacht Club, literally on top of the Bluefish River. So if you think that DBMS's student population has grown by a huge percentage and it didn't exist 25 years ago, all of that septic system of all the businesses in Snug Harbor is being pumped with no treatment up to the Duxbury Yacht Club golf course. I also learned our water treatment plant on Lover's Lane is running only at 10% capacity. It's designed for 30,000 gallon. It is a true water treatment plant. They remove nitrogen, they test the effluent, they have monitoring wells. They average during the school year, during the school day, 4,500 gallons a day, and the system can handle 30,000 gallons a day. So I think there'll be low hanging fruits, but you're right. The town will have to decide, and a sewer can't be a combined septic system. A sewer system has to lead to water treatment, or you have to have on site treatment on a homeowner basis. But you can't, like the Wadsworth is a shared system. And the reason I didn't say anything about that is it's discharging most likely into Kingston Bay, which gets the benefit of much more tidal exchange. So that's like the dilution is the solution over there. That's not good either. The big leaching field under the Wadsworth playing field, obviously is leaching directly into the bay. It's likely to be on the other side, but maybe not. It might be going into the Bluefish. So I'm with you. I think being proactive is, and also if Wareham could do it in 2013, and Wareham does not have a lot of resources in the context of the communities on the Cape and on Buzzards Bay. They did this in 2013 voluntarily, put these heightened restrictions on septic system design. I'm like, hey, if Wareham can do it, we can do it. So anyhow, I'm with you. I think there's an opportunity to be ahead on this. Um, but it's going to need, we're going to have good data because there's such a climate of Duxbury doesn't have the resources and people are feeling the stress of the infrastructure of our community. But, do we want to protect Duxbury Bay for the long term? That's something I think most people will support. So anyhow, I'll stop talking, but I'm with you.
I have a few questions. If I understand, so looking at the map of the bay and the nitrogen levels, well, and including Plymouth and Kingston, that do have pretty heavy septic density. Our problem is kind of this combination of septic density, but also lack of exchange of bay
Exactly.
water. Okay.
Exactly. Because Cape
Yeah.
Cod Bay, we're blessed with Cape Cod Bay is deep, clean, and cold, and low nutrients. So the water quality in Cape Cod Bay, from our discussion, is like the perfect source to clean our bay, but we just don't get that exchange. I thought, Melissa, when I started the study, I was like, oh God, Plymouth and Kingston are going to be bad because of all the growth that's happening there. And it turns out, well, okay, they're getting the benefit of Cape Cod Bay coming in and out twice a day.
Um, so a few more questions. In terms of goals or levels for nitrogen and phosphorus, do we have targets that we're
Yes.
working towards?
Yes.
Okay.
And we can measure it too. So that's the good news. If we do something, again, we have to take action that's measurable. But if we take action, we can measure the effect. And you can also model it. If you sewered the Millbrook business areas and some surrounding and put it into the school system or a Powder Point or whatever, you should be able to model the nitrogen that you're taking out of taking out from going into the system.
Excellent. And I'm thinking of, I think it's Weston and was it Weston and Sampson or
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
any other org. I'm wondering if we wanted to tease out, contribution of septic versus fertilizer. I imagine they have different ratios of nitrogen phosphorus. Is there any way to work with
Yes,
those? Yeah.
and I don't know, but yes, there's,
Okay.
isotope studies or what have you that they can figure out what the source is, and they can actually source out animal waste versus human waste, for birds, and you get tons of geese on the golf courses in the winter and stuff. So I think, yeah, all those answers I think are possible. Um, I think the good news is there's pretty good data of how much per capita the nitrogen contribution is to the groundwater. So
Yes.
that's why I think it's really very short money for those guys to update their study and say, here's how much we think are coming from septic systems.
Yeah, and they seemed open to this
Yeah,
idea. Okay.
the lead hydrologist was a guy named Kevin McKinnon,
Yeah.
and I met with him with John Brawley, who was our contract expert, and one of my colleagues, Rich Kleiman, who's on the Bay Management Commission. We met with him last week, and he'll get us a proposal early in the new year. He's like, "Yeah, I definitely can help you do this."
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested to see that. That would because I was on the PFAS advisory group and as we went through the whole modeling for PFAS contributions. So
Great.
um well, I guess just a comment. I'm really interested in what Wareham did, and I do like that idea of, I know at some point down the road, as both you and Bruce have said, that we may not have choices in terms of what we have to do, but uh, I like that kind of adapting some kind of phased approach potentially where, with proximity to a waterway, we would, have some requirement for nutrient removal. So
Yeah, and the other consideration is generally there's support for voluntary action. There's no real support for regulatory responses. So, I think there's a lot of financial support to both the town and to the residents if we're going to be proactive, including stuff like individual betterments. And again, I'm not an expert in this, but just digging in, a homeowner's upgrade can be financed by the town, and betterments can be applied individually to homeowners that can stay with the deed. So, in other words, if somebody buys and sells their house, the betterment can stay with that, and basically the town can essentially finance the upgrades. And again, I've been told we don't have to dig up every septic system in the town. We can keep the septic system as long as it's a functioning Title V, but then you have to add this additional treatment capability. So that's something that I think is positive. It's not cheap though. I mean, I think you're talking 20 to 30,000 per typical septic system are the kind of numbers I've been hearing.
right. Okay, that's good to know. Good to keep in mind. But yeah, I think it is. I would agree with Bruce that it's time for us to address this or look into options.
Yeah. And I just like they just put in sidewalks on Washington Street. I wouldn't think putting in sewerage to sewer some area of town in proximity to the water treatment facility on Lover's Lane. I just don't see how that's out of the ballpark of possibility. It can't be that disruptive or bad to be able to pump wastewater up to the school.
Melissa, did you have any other questions? I didn't want to
Oh, go
jump in.
ahead. Sorry, I'll stop. Stop it.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, for all your work on this. It's definitely great to see all the different aspects of the report and everything contributing to the health of the bay. I had one question on, town stormwater runoff. I was trying to look to see if there was like any mapping of outfalls within town, and how those individual catch basins contribute overall percentages, to the, runoff, whether it's from, the outfalls or just sheet flow from, streets, paved streets going directly into the bay. And if maybe that's something to look into, would be retrofitting existing catch basins with nitrogen reducing systems would be something else that might be worthwhile looking at.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I don't know the subject, but to do a comprehensive source study, you want to consider runoff for sure. I think the probably given other communities' experiences that are maybe similar to Duxbury's, septic is most likely kind of call first order effect. But I think you're right. We should properly study because if you fix the wrong problem, you're not going to get the results. So if we think it's all one thing and it turns out there's a significant contribution coming from somewhere else, then we really have wasted time and money, in my opinion. So I'm with you. I think so I'd really encourage you to, in your networks, if you know of anyone who really knows this subject, love some help to understand how we might get some, really comprehensive advice and or work done.
On that note, Mike, sorry to interrupt, but we do have an MS4 permit for stormwater, and the DPW probably is the one that is in charge of that, I'd imagine. So that, and we do need to have a stormwater management plan and plan for nutrient runoff. That is one of the newer criteria for that permit. So there might be some synergy in talking to Sheila Scarzi about what's required for stormwater runoff and what they're doing and what they know. Because they had to do mapping, they had to do, there are a lot of permit requirements there that have come up over the last few years.
Yeah, and I know I think it's the EPA, waterfront marinas have to have a NIPD's permit, which basically requires certain testing for runoff for their particular sites, and if they're power washing and everything else, that goes along with those, travel lifts or any other infrastructure. I know I assume that's something that the town, the relevant commercial entities in town are required to follow. But I guess, it's a multi-prong approach here to just almost quantify where these nitrogen impacts are coming from. So the only other thing I was looking at was when you had that one slide up with the, I think it was with the nitrogen levels or the water quality, was if there was any indication of less concentrations after the dredging that happened in the bay, and just how dredging, with that increase in tidal flow and tidal exchange, could be seen as, a method to, I guess, dilute, what
Improve things,
we're
right?
getting, because it kind of correlates as you look up into those different, Bluefish, Back River, it almost, those higher levels are correlate to the depths,
Yeah. It's a good question. The data covers the harbor master. It goes back to 2006. And I'm trying to remember when the dredging was done, but maybe like 10 years ago or something like that. So the data's in there. Maybe there was a short-term dip, but it's been rising since. So maybe there was some benefit for a short time. Um,
Yeah, because overall, isn't the Back River slowly accreting over time? It's slowly filling in, correct? Which would help the state of the marsh back there being in the, in the positive state that it's in, based on
right.
the studies you were referencing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I
then
think
it's, yeah.
Yeah, I think some of the super high concentrations, there is a volume thing. One of the things we want to do is measure, they're measuring right at the bridge. There's not tons of volume of water there. If you think about what you're catching from the bluefish, it would be good to take that a little bit further, call it downstream on an outgoing tide to see. So I don't overreact, except that when you look at the watershed data and you look at how much is concentrated at the bluefish, it makes sense that it's probably going to be the highest there of anywhere else. And that would influence the harbor master area as well, because all that water is coming out and around. So, but no, I think the task at hand, and Bruce, I liked what you said is the Board of Health should own this, which is what's a source study and what's a contribution from septic systems and how might that impact Duxbury, regulations now or in the future. I'm with you. I'd love to be a support, but have you guys take the lead.
Well,
Well, listen,
I mean, regardless of all the measurements and everything else, you showed a slide that had the pink, and it said
Yeah,
here, these are the nitrogen sensitive areas
yep.
that are going that eventually, I think, are going to be implementing the Cape Cod Title V. I mean, Cape Cod does have a different problem, I think, in terms of their groundwater. That it was formed by the glaciers, and it sort of stays there. I think
Hmm.
not
Right.
much of it, but our groundwater, our aquifer, doesn't
Is
start
moving.
in Duxbury.
Yeah, yeah.
It starts somewhere else, like in Kingston and Pembroke and on that map that you showed, I think some of those areas also were part of the nitrogen sensitive area.
Yeah, and what I wanted to show, so this is the Mass DEP 2017 report. It's just to show you how big it is. We are above the threshold. So if the EPA accepts the threshold, we become a nitrogen sensitive area. So that's really the key thing is we're already above the threshold. It's just a draft threshold. But this is a pretty comprehensive study they did and published in 2017. So I think that's really the key. How it is definitely not, well, if things get worse, we could. It's just the EPA has to accept the draft report recommendation. If they accept it, we're over the threshold. So anyhow, I think that's the right way to think about it. It's not a matter of when, it's if. I'm sorry, it's not a matter of if, it's when.
Yes, and that's why we need to start doing something about it now. I mean, there's
Yep,
got when you look at the resources that are going to be required, either by each individual homeowner or by the town, it's going to take a lot
yep.
to
And
fix this
that's,
problem.
I agree. And I think there's resources available to do this. It's just not when it's required.
Yeah, and it seems to me, I mean, maybe I might not be correct here, but it seems to me that the Board of Health has to be a leader in this, uh, working together with the selectmen and the other boards, and maybe your organization. I mean, it's not just the bay;
No, of
it's
course.
all the ponds and
Hmm.
all the water in Duxbury that's affected by all this.
Yep.
So we should be on top of this. At least that's my thinking. I don't know what the rest of the board thinks. I know that I've been pounding doors for a while on this and also talking with the selectman representative. We have a representative from the selectmen that work together with the Board of Health. So he knows what some of the thinking is here. I'm not sure whether I think probably part of your goal was to bring the board up to date on some of this.
100%. And I can tell you on the Bay Management Commission, I joined 2 years ago, the Bay Management Commission. There wasn't a consensus about water quality. The oyster fishermen were adamant that the water quality was changing in a negative way. But others were like, well, we have Cape Cod Bay, we can't be different than Cape Cod Bay. So there really wasn't a consensus. And my position was, well, if people are worried about it and people are talking about it, let's find out what the situation is. And we were just lucky that we uncovered this treasure trove of data. The Bay Management Commission now unanimously agrees we have a nutrient problem. So that's major progress in the last 2 years. But now we have to think about, okay, what are the steps we can do to be proactive? And but the good news is I think there's a consensus, in fact, a strong agreement. There is a water quality problem, which is going to get worse over time in Duxbury Bay if we don't take action. So I feel very happy that we've catalyzed that kind of consensus.
Yeah, I think we need to think about what those people about 100 years ago did as far as Duxbury Beach,
Mm-hmm.
when they said if we don't do something, that it's going to look like Atlantic City.
Mm-hmm.
So they did something. And so we need to think about what's going to happen in the next 100 years, right now, because and we have an opportunity. Well, I'm so happy to see you guys putting all this together, because maybe it'll wake some of us up.
Yeah, I think we can do something about it. That's the good news. So we can't control what happens in some ways. We can do something about this.
Yeah,
So I feel very optimistic. So I appreciate the time. Everyone, it's close to the holidays. You probably heard maybe a bit more than you wanted to, but as you can tell, enthusiastic about collaborating, getting people on the same page, and trying to get something done. So I appreciate if you share my thinking that you help the next stages, which is let's figure out what the sources are.
So Peter, yeah, again, thanks for bringing this forward. I mean, it's clear that the Board of Health has an important potential role here. I'm just trying to think about, some sort of concrete next steps. So can you talk a little bit about the Bay Management Commission? I mean, is there an opportunity to have a Board of Health member on that, or go to the
Sure.
meetings, or involved in some way in the report back? Because for us to take this problem off in ourselves
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. So we need to
You,
leverage what's already there, but I'm just not clear how to do that.
Yeah, so my understanding historically, and I can tell you right now, we only have one legally appointed member. So it's been an intermittent committee. So when the select board said, hey, what's going on in the Bay, the committee becomes very active and does something, but then traditionally is not functioned on a regular routine schedule. I'm working to change that because I think this requires some kind of ongoing work, and there's so much other activity that is needing, like we need to actually collaborate within the town as well as what's happening around the town. So I would say yes, for sure, we should get a Board of Health member to participate in the Bay Management Commission, and we're trying to get ourselves onto a much more sustainable, regular, maybe monthly is not necessary for what we're doing, but we should be meeting every couple of months at least, and we should have kind of a very routine program where we work at this for the coming years.
Yeah, I think you just sort of liaison, between
Yeah,
This would make sense.
Yeah, and but what my thought specifically is, I think we're going to be able to, for very low money and relatively short time, get not a definitive nutrient study, but a sufficient to know, do we need to do a lot more work on the study side, or do we need to start focusing on remediation? Because I think the Weston Sampson study is so close to what's going to be necessary to do the nutrient study. So what I would recommend is I'll share when we hear back from Weston Sampson, what is their proposal? What's the time scale? What's the cost? And what could they deliver? And that would be important. Bay Management Commission has no resources historically. I've been advising the select board that I think every 5 years at least, the town should support the development of a State of the Bay report, and that requires some expert. We privately funded it, so we had to pay a consultant to do, 125 hours of work. So that's not sustainable. We're not always going to be able to get people to donate to get this work done. You guys you have a staff, which is great, but you also may have some access to resources. I know how difficult the resources are in town. But I think that's also important that, the town, if they're going to properly recommend action, there needs to be sufficient amount of study that it's not a science project, but you're pretty confident the action you're going to take is going to have the results. So I think we'll have a kind of, call it 80% confidence level without a lot more effort. I would say by the end of the first quarter, that's what I would say. And then I think we should go from there and decide, is more study necessary, or do we already have enough that we should start thinking about what options are available for, call it low hanging fruit, working our way to a more comprehensive solution. Does that make sense, David? Like, maybe a circle back when we have this kind of high level study.
Yeah, I think so. So maybe we should plan on having you come back, I don't know, whatever time frame you think's reasonable, 2 months, 3 months, something like that, or what, if you want to think about it and let us know.
Yeah, and I'll share with Lauren kind of what is being proposed, so I could be wrong. I mean, they might say this is $100,000 study, in which case it's not going to be the right study for us at this point because we don't have the resources. So until I find out from them, I'm speculating of what they're going to say this will cost. But I'll keep Lauren. Does that make sense? I'll keep you posted on what's going on, and also Nancy at the Conservation Commission.
Yes.
I've been sort of keeping her abreast as well.
Yes, definitely. And I can follow up with Wareham. They're
Great,
part of our grant collaborative public health excellence. So I see him at least once a month.
great, awesome.
Okay, good. So some next steps.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful holidays, and look forward to seeing you again in the new year.
Thank you, Peter. You too.
Thank you. Thanks very
Bye-bye.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, yeah, this is quite interesting.
Yeah.
Health agent updates, next item.
Okay, so I have the stats from Kathy Carney from November 20th to December 17th. COVID-19, over the age of 5, under the age of 18, 2 cases, and over the age of 18, 7 cases for a total of 9. For Lyme, we have 2 probable, 1 suspect, 5 influenza cases, 1 salmonella case, 1 hepatitis B, 1 case of human granulocytic anaplasmosis, 1 case of norovirus, and 1 Campylobacter case. And then just for some updates, we just had our 6-month tobacco compliance checks done, and out of 7, we had 1 violation. So I'll be sending out an enforcement letter with a fine. It'll be $2,000 because it's the second fine within 36 months of compliance checks. Let's see, we've completed all of the statutory food inspections for 2025, thankfully. I have the Grant Collaborative food inspector that was helping with that. She's retiring though, so we have the job posted through the collaborative. Hopefully we'll fill that. And inspection reports obviously are available upon request if anyone wants to see any of those. We have interviews set up for the first week in January for the opioid abatement working group admin who will report directly to me, but will most likely be working remotely to help us figure out how and where to spend the money that the working group wants, in a way that they want to do. And last, our next meeting, Mary Lampert would really like to come on and talk to us about e-bikes and potential regulations maybe. So I'm going to try to see if we can get someone from Duxbury Police to join us. And we can go from there. In terms of housing, we just currently have one house that's still condemned at this time. The house on Mullins had the placard removed about 2 weeks ago, so they fixed all of their issues and we were able to do that. And that's it.
Just a question. I mean, I do think the e-bike issue is a problem, and I'd be happy to have her come, and I'm curious about what she has to say. But I don't. It would help to know what authority or whatever. If we wanted to do something, can we even do something? I'm not sure that it fits in the board. It might, but I just if you could kind of look into that a little bit too.
Yes, I will. I know that in Plymouth, through their Health and Human Services, they implemented some rules and regulations. And I think that our grant epidemiologist, Devin, who I think you guys know, worked on some of that legwork. So I plan on reaching out to her as well to find out what they've done in Plymouth. But yeah, so she did send material and I can send that out as well.
Okay. Great.
And then any other topics that anyone wants to put on the agenda, just let me know. I know we still have that Kratom topic on the back burner. It would be good to have experts on the other side of things come in and speak with us so I can try to work on making that happen once I get through all the renewals. It's just been a little busy because I don't have any administrative support, so it's just me. It's been rough, but that's it.
Okay. Thank you. And then approved meeting minutes.
So I don't have them ready, but I have almost everything ready to review for our next meeting. Karen will be so happy. We have an approved method for AI to help come up with synopsis, which is really incredible. So, obviously it still has to be reviewed, but that saves a ton of time. So we will be caught up by January meeting.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Thank God, because it's been weighing on me heavily to try to get caught up with that stuff. So
It's a lot of work, but it's good you have some AI help.
yeah, definitely. All right.
Okay. I think that's the list on the agenda.
Yeah.
To adjourn from anyone?
Motion to adjourn. And well, take my phone off.
Second. Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Bye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everyone.